Hey, I'm Drotos from KeyboardImprov.com, and this is the first in a series of videos I'm making called Journey Through the Real Book. This is the real book, and if you don't know it, it's sort of the Bible of lead sheets for jazz tunes. There's how many in here? There's 462 pages. Most pages are just one tune, so there's about 450 tunes in here. And sort of because they're in this book, they're the ones that most people play, at least at first. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They put them in the book, and then they become popular because they're in the book. And I've had a real book since, oh boy, I was about 15 years old. That's almost 40 years now. And this is my first real book. I put it in this 3-ring binder to protect it, and ironically, the 3-ring binder is falling apart. But this is the 5th edition. And the history of the real book's really interesting because it was published without giving royalties to the composers, which is kind of a no-no. But it was done, it's sort of in the mists of history, and nobody will admit to being the first one to publish this for those reasons. But it was from the Berklee College of Music in Boston, we know that. And all of a sudden, in the early 70s, they just appeared. And even some of the early tunes were exercises that the students wrote for those classes. There's Pat Metheny tunes in there called Exercise Number 6 or something, you know. And it was handwritten in calligraphy, kind of in a sloppy way, and that became influenced what we now know as the jazz font. So if you look at the real book now, it's kind of the same thing, but it's a computer font called the jazz font. It was based on the writing in the real book. And some fun things about this. I got this, you couldn't buy these in stores, you know, unless they were kind of selling them, you know, sort of surreptitiously. And I got this from a very famous jazz guitar teacher named Sal Salvador. His son was one of my best friends in high school, and I was very lucky to get it. I've spent a lot of time in here. And what I'm going to do is make a journey through here, where I'm going to play each tune in order, one a week, starting with the first one, which is Duke Ellington's The African Flower. It's the first one here because of the word African. It starts with A, but it's really The African Flower. They don't have it here. It was in the original real book too. And a couple things about this that are kind of fun. It's from an album called Money Jungle, which was one of Ellington's great trio albums. If you don't have that, check it out. It's Duke Ellington, Max Roach on drums, and Charles Mingus on bass. And it's from, I believe, 1963. And it was, I think, a real attempt from Ellington of just doing something out of the box. You know, he didn't perform with Mingus all the time. These were younger musicians, Max Roach, beboppers. And this was putting himself in a position where he usually wasn't at. You know, he was used to playing with his own band, and this was an amazing album. They did some standards, they did some of his tunes, and some new things that he created, including The African Flower for this. And just a fun fact here, my original real book is signed, I don't know if you can see this, by Max Roach, who I got to meet during 4 summers at the University of Massachusetts in the 80s during their Jazz in July program, where I studied with Billy Taylor, the great jazz pianist. And it says, "For Ron, stay strong and peace, Max Roach," and it's dated July 19th, 1984. So, real great memory from me. I learned a lot from hanging out with Max. And his ensemble that he was leading actually recorded one of my arrangements of Dolphin Dance, which was a real highlight for me. So getting back to The African Flower. This tune, it was created by Duke Ellington from Money Jungle, and Max tells a story about it. He told this to us as students, and I think it might be in Ellington's book, but I'm not sure, where he told the trio, Mingus and Max Roach, to think of a beautiful flower, like an orchid, that's in the middle of the jungle in Africa. And it's the most beautiful flower in the world, but nobody has ever seen it. No human has ever laid eyes on it. And that's what he wanted them to think of while they were recording this. And it's something that not a lot of musicians do. I mean, it's text painting. And we kind of say, oh yeah, well, music's not about the notes, it's about, you know, the feeling behind it or painting a picture. But then it stops there, you know. But for Ellington, that was on the surface. That's what he wanted them to do. And it can lead you to a really great place to play from, where you're not thinking so much, oh, is this good, is this bad, you know. You're more free because you're just trying to paint, you know, and whatever comes out. So for instance, instead of thinking of the bebop lick, you might be thinking of this beautiful flower. It might come out like, the shimmering colors or something. You can allow yourself to do that if you're painting a picture. And it's not so much about being self-critical, like so many times we are, but about actually painting this picture. And that's what I want to hopefully explore here and inspire you to do. So here it goes, the African flower. Now when you're learning it, bear in mind two things. One is that Ellington changed this tune a lot. If you listen to recordings he did or live performances, you can find from even in the 70s later on, he would change the melody, and sometimes he would even play a G flat major chord in the third measure. So instead of this, he would go to, so this tune was fluid. It's not exactly always played like it's in the real book here. And particularly at the bottom of the page, where it does go to G flat for kind of a bridge section, it doesn't really have any melody here for 4 measures, but there were certain things he did kind of play a lot, these tenths. And indeed, some of those were in the original real books. I don't know why they took them out here, but I'm going to play some of those and some things I've created for that section. So here you go, The African Flower by Duke Ellington. Boy, that was fun. So as you can see, you know, I was just trying some different things, and you can do it too. It's a great tune because it's really based on a minor blues, but with a few twists that are very, you know, Ellingtonian, you could say, because Ellington wrote probably 1,000 tunes based on either the major or the minor blues. And each one's a little different, either, of course, melodically, but also harmonically or in terms of the feel. And a couple of just brief observations about this tune from my perspective. It has straight eighth notes. It's kind of a little soft Latin type feel. And because of that, I think because of that, it's something he kept playing until the 70s. And remember, in the 70s, that's when swing music wasn't really in vogue like it was earlier. And a lot of jazz musicians were turning to straight eighths, like Miles Davis and jazz fusion. And it was also the beginning of ECM with the record label, with Pat Metheny, with straight eighth notes. And Ellington was right there with them. A lot, if you look at some of his solo piano performances on YouTube or on recordings from the 70s, a lot of the tunes were his straight eighth tunes. He even did some, you know, rock tunes actually in the 60s. But this is a good example of something that would not be too far from ECM, you know. And Ellington was staying current even at the end of his life. Always had his ear to the ground. Some of his musicians who played with him told me that. So have fun with your playing this week. If you're interested in more step-by-step type lessons, check out my video course at KeyboardImprov.com. I'm going to be going to the next tune, Afro Blue, next week in the real book, so hope to see you there. And practice hard. Remember, it is a journey, so enjoy every step of the way. See you in the next video.